Jansen Harris here with the Flying High podcast. Joined by me is Craig, Sean, and Steezy A. Smith. We're presented by Your Future Media. Get involved with GGC and Ya Sox. Sean, I want to start with you because you've been a loyal Falcons fan. You like the skill guys, the running backs, the wide receivers. Let's talk about Calvin Ridley, 27 years old, in his prime. Is he a true number one receiver? 50% of people are saying, yay, he's a number one. Some people are saying he's a number one talent. Some people say he's a certified number two. I don't know. What does the future look like for Calvin Ridley, Sean? Do you see him getting traded?
Well, I'm hopeful he stays on the team, man. Like we said last week, Jansen, with Calvin Ridley, I think if you have Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts on the same field, it can only do wonders for the Falcons. We've seen most of last year, Calvin Ridley didn't play most of the season. Kyle Pitts started emerging around the fifth or sixth game. He took off. He set, tight end records and whatnot, at least coming for the tight ends, their rookie season, he set records and stuff. So I think having Calvin Ridley, to me, I still think one of the best route runners in the NFL. You can only help Matt Ryan out because at this stage of Matt Ryan's career, he can still produce, but he needs the help. So having a Calvin Ridley on the field and Kyle Pitts and Russell Gage and these guys, it can only help Matt Ryan. So as a Falcons fan, I'm hopeful that he stays. We can whatever he was battling through. If it was mental adversities, whatever it might be last year, hopefully he can get back on the field. But I mean, to answer your, part of the other question, I think you were alluding to as well, is he a number one receiver? I think he still has the talent to be it, definitely for our team. You know what I mean? I think he's one of the best route runners in the game. But again, when he really produced, we still had Julio Jones on the opposite side. And although Julio's been banged up the last few years, you still, when his presence on the field, it gives Calvin really more opportunities to continue to get the ball because they're still worried about covering Julio Jones. Now that Julio's gone, this is Calvin Ridley's really first season saying, okay, hey, you're the number one guy going into the year. Obviously, they drafted Kyle Pitts, the fourth overall pick, but still coming into the season like, hey, pressure's going to be on you. You have to deliver. You're the veteran now, in the locker room and, of course, for the receiving core. So as a Falcons fan, I'm very hopeful. I hope he stays on the team. I hope he doesn't get traded away. But I think he still has potential to be that number one receiver, on the Falcons and possibly another team. But I think it has to be definitely the right situation.
Sean, before we move on to Craig with this one, got to ask you, Julio Jones, and you brought it up. There's a great point about used to be his team and now Calvin Ridley's demand. How much were the Falcons missing him in that locker room, leadership-wise, and knowing a guy who's been there, done that? How much do you think that impacted Calvin Ridley potentially when Julio Jones was traded?
I mean, it could have had an impact, like you said. I mean, they're both from Alabama. It's the Falcons talk before. It's about brotherhood. So I'm sure, just at least having Julio, even though I believe the last season Julio played, he missed probably like 9 or 10 games with the Falcons in the 2020 season. But still having him on the sideline, seeing stuff from, a veteran eyes like Julio, he can still, hey, maybe you need to run this route on this particular player, whatever it is on this defense, whatever they're saying. So he could be the coach on the sideline. But too much, I don't feel like too much of this season he was necessarily missed as much because you still got guys, Calvin really was there. He was there for the part of the season. Kyle Pitts is coming in new, so him and Julio Jones, they never crossed paths. So I don't think Julio was necessarily missed too much this season because of the new group of guys that we had. But at the same time, of course, it's still Julio Jones, so I don't want to say he wasn't missed at all because he's still one of the best receivers of all time. Even though he's nicked up a lot, these last 3 to 4 years, it's still good to have his presence out there, even being a coach on the sideline if he's not playing. So I believe it was missed, but I don't think it was sorely missed as of, say, some other years when he was really producing on the field and really being able to be out there.
Craig, your thoughts on Calvin Ridley? Do you think that he's going to get traded?
I honestly don't. I don't really know, but I would definitely lean towards no on that. Just because, I mean, his first 3 years in the league, he produced number one receiver stats. He is that guy. He had almost 1,000 yards in all 3 seasons. He actually did pass 1,000 in one of them, and he hits almost 10 touchdowns every year. Obviously, his stats this year were not great because he only played like 5 games, but he has shown, based on his route running ability and his stats year after year after year, that he has that ability to be a number one guy. So I think if the Falcons were smart They definitely would try to keep him. They have bigger needs than wide receiver to face in the draft. They really, really, in my opinion, need an edge rusher first. And so if they get rid of Calvin Ridley, then they have to draft a receiver then first overall because they will have literally nobody besides Kyle Pitts. So I think they need to do everything in their power to keep Calvin Ridley.
Okay. Steezy A. Smith, your thoughts on Calvin Ridley? Is he going to get traded? Do you see him come back with the Falcons and maybe him and Matt Ryan getting things together? What's your thoughts on Calvin Ridley in his future?
So to answer your first question, Jansen, I'm going to say Calvin Ridley is the number one wide receiver in the National Football League, with the exception of this past year, like Craig just talked about. He's put up 800 yards and at least 7 touchdowns in every single year. And then, Sean, I know you mentioned the year in which, Julio, his last year there, he missed 7 games. In that year, Calvin Ridley had 90 catches for over 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. And so I think that alone, on top of the talent, on top of the pedigree, on top of the fact that he played at Alabama, he's always been a number one wideout. Like you said, Sean, he can run all the routes on the route tree. He's not super athletic, but he's athletic enough. He's able to run all the routes. He's athletic enough. He's not super fast. He's not super quick, but he does enough. And I think that, to me, that's the number one wide receiver in the league. He's over 6 feet tall. And as for his future in Atlanta, I don't know if he comes back just because I don't know what's going on. I don't know if the mental health issues, I'm not trying to downplay the mental health aspect just because that is a serious matter. But what if he has some sort of friction, between the franchise and him? Maybe him and Matt Ryan weren't seeing eye to eye. And so as far as the future part of things, I don't know if he's going to get traded. I think if he truly wants out, they're going to have to get rid of him just because you don't want to waste another year having him on a roster, paying him, but he's not playing for you. And if he doesn't want to be there, if he doesn't want to play for you, if he doesn't want to, have a future in Atlanta, then trade him for what you can get. Craig, like you mentioned, the Falcons have a plethora of holes. I mean, you guys just released Dante Fowler Jr. He wasn't even producing and putting up numbers like that. And so you guys definitely have an even bigger need at edge rusher on the offensive line. Things could be solidified. I know we're going to touch on this in just a little bit. Cordell Patterson should definitely be re-signed. But nevertheless, y'all still need some new blood in the running back room. And so there's so many holes, so many different positions to target. Maybe a backup, somebody you could groom behind Matt Ryan, even though this class isn't super it's not packed full of quarterback talent or at least prospects. And so maybe you could find somebody later in the draft. But if he truly does not want to be here, if that situation cannot be reconciled, then trade him for what you could get now. Just because if you're going to run it back with Matt Ryan, he's going to need some weapons to throw to. I mean, if it's only Kyle Pitts out there and Cordell Patterson, you could double team both those guys. And who you got to throw to? He's 36 years old. So as far as his future, I don't know where he's going to go, but I know that if he truly wants out, he's not going to be in Atlanta. If they could work things out, if they could reconcile things, then he'll be back just because of running it back with Matt Ryan.
Look, I think that Calvin Ridley wants out because if there's no conversation, there's literally been no dialogue with Calvin Ridley and the Falcons or Calvin Ridley and even the media with an update, him saying at the least, I want to be here. So if I'm the Falcons, right? Of course, you want to get that first-round pick. If you can't get a first-round pick, and let's say it's a third-round pick, get an impact player on the offensive line, maybe another wide receiver, a cornerback, an edge, if possible. Okay, I'm not a general manager, obviously, but those are the type of trade packages I would like to see. Like you were saying, Steezy A. Smith, they have to bring in that talent, O-line, D-line, interior D-line, outside D-line, something. A pass rusher, a guy with great turnovers, a safety, cornerback. But we'll see how that plays out. But speaking of Cordell Patterson, 30 years old, he's expressed he's a guy who definitely wants to be in Atlanta. And Arthur Blank also co-signed it, saying he wants him back. The cap is looking a little funky right now for the Falcons, $7 million over. But again, general managers' jobs are to maneuver the numbers. Look at this guy, 11 touchdowns, 618 rushing yards, 548 receiving yards. Sean, what's your feel on this? Is Cordell Patterson coming back, or do you feel like it was maybe a one-year wonder? Didn't get much production out of him. And remember, he was drafted the first round. Didn't get much production out of him on the wide receiver side or running back side before this last season with Arthur Smith. Do you think it was like a fluke year, or do you think it's something that they could build on with the Falcons?
No, you can definitely build on. Cordell Patterson's the MVP of the offense to me. That's including Kyle Pitts, too. Kyle Pitts had a great, he had a really good season, definitely for a rookie, as well. But Cordell Patterson, man, he was the MVP of the offense by far last season. I mean, and like you said as well, Jansen, he definitely was a Pro Bowl snub. Like you said, combined scrimmage yards, he had over 1,100 when it comes to his rushing and receiving. We know he could do the kick return game. And I said coming into the season, I said this was a good signing, for the Atlanta Falcons by signing him because he can do it all. And this is the most I believe he had impact on a particular football team, on the Atlanta Falcons because, again, I always thought he was a stud. He doesn't have one particular position, but he was very much needed for us as a team. He's the starter running back. I thought Mike Davis was a good pickup originally, signing him because he was a pretty, I thought he was a solid back in South Carolina, come out of college, and also in Carolina, just a wrecking ball. But Cordell, I feel like he outshined him at the running back position, and not just getting, being a scat back, getting the flares and screens, but actually getting the handoffs. He's a big guy as well, a little bit taller than Mike Davis. So I think after seeing what he did this past season, you have to re-sign Cordell Patterson. He's 30 years old, but hey, he pretty much stayed healthy majority of the season. I know he was nicked up. I think he missed he didn't finish a couple games, the Dallas game, and I believe another game as well later in the season. But you have to. I mean, who else are you gonna sign? I mean, I'm here at Flowery Branch. I'm still training each and every day. I'm over here. I could bring my cleats and give you a little workout and whatnot. But besides that, man, I mean, Cordell Patterson, I think you definitely have to re-sign him, man. He definitely proved himself last year. He could do it all. He's one of the best receivers on the team as well. I think it's a no-brainer to re-sign Cordell Patterson. He proved himself.
Breaking news: Sean Fowler opens to replacing Patterson. That's what I'm hearing right now. He's open to it. We'll see if it happens. Craig, your thoughts on Patterson? Should the Falcons bring him back? Do you think he could have another impact year, or do you think maybe it was a one-season wonder? Or maybe I sound like a hater, even putting the question like that.
Well, honestly, it's pretty common that in the NFL, once a guy hits around 30 years old, his production definitely drops. I think that they should try to re-sign him because, like Sean said, he was pretty much the MVP of their offense. What I don't think they should do, and this obviously kind of depends on their cap space available this year, but they shouldn't give him starting running back or starting receiver money. I don't think he's good enough at either position to get that. But he's a valuable and versatile piece that can benefit any offense that he's on. So I think it would be kind of, dumb to not try to get him back because he was such a big part of their offense and he could do a lot of things for you. He had a great season. So I think they should try to sign him, but depending on their cap space and stuff like that and how much he wants to get, I wouldn't, sacrifice too much to get him back because he is old and he isn't great at one particular thing except for returning. So if they're smart with it and they can negotiate well, I think he would be definitely beneficial to that offense for sure.
Steezy, 30-year-old Cordell Patterson, should they bring him back?
So real quick, I want to address what Craig talked about. You was talking about how, usually when guys hit the age of 30, production starts to fall off of a cliff. The one pushback I have on that is usually when guys hit 30 in the National Football League or in any other sports league, it's because they have a whole lot of wear and tear on their bodies. Cordell Patterson does not have a whole lot of wear and tear. He hasn't really had a lot of productive seasons. He hasn't really played a lot offensively, at least. And so I don't really see the whole age thing being as much of a factor with him as with maybe other players, but Cordell Patterson absolutely has to be re-signed. Yes, he's 30 years old, but Arthur Smith is an offensive genius. He's a mastermind, and he knows how to use Cordell Patterson, whether that's in the run game, in the pass game. And because of all this uncertainty revolving around Calvin Ridley, that makes the need to re-sign him that much more essential. Like, it's that much more important to have to bring him back just because he was such a vital piece of the offense. Sean, like you talked about, 1,100 scrimmage yards, 11 touchdowns. I mean, for me, I picked him up in fantasy in a whole lot of my leagues last year before the year even began because I wasn't sold on Mike Davis. He used to play in Seattle. He's a solid running back, but he's not a starter running back in the National Football League. He's not a three-down running back. And so with Cordell Patterson, I'm always that dude who's looking for sleepers, looking for guys that, fly under the radar. And with Cordell Patterson, I picked him up and he ended up winning me a few leagues. And so I know that's fantasy football, but I bring that up to say that not only was he great statistically, but you have an offensive mastermind in Arthur Smith who knows how to use them. And I think he's only starting to scratch his potential, honestly. Like, we haven't yet to see the best of Cordell Patterson. And so I think he definitely should be re-signed. I don't think he's going to break the bank. I think a contract somewhere in the long lines of maybe 3 years, 24 mil, 8 million, on an average annual basis. I think that falls right in line with what he brings to the table. And you bring in a few other playmakers around that offense to kind of complement these guys. I think we can see a career year as early as next season.
Absolutely. Look, I want to add this before we move on to the next subject. It feels good to see a guy actually want to be in Atlanta. And that's the thing about Cordell Patterson. He's really thirsty to get back in Atlanta. He loves the culture here, even though it's, again, another season they don't make the playoffs. But he's shining. Like Sean said, like you said, Steezy, like you said, Craig, he's putting up numbers. He's producing. He's a fresh running back, too. Every time I'm like, oh, man, maybe it's just the O-line. Boom, 4 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards. And then Mike Davis, who I thought Mike Davis was going to produce, because when I saw Carolina, I liked what I saw to him in Carolina. But to me, a lot of the season, and I hate to categorize it like this, but it is what it is, he played like a bum. All the big thigh things, this, and this, 2 yards, 1 yard.
Too many fumbles, too. Too many fumbles.
Yeah, and he fumbles, too. Sean noticed that, too. He fumbles the ball. I'm just not impressed by him. Yeah, he looked good in the weight room, or the way they would post him on Instagram, boosting him up, but production-wise, he needs to go. And that brings me to the next question is, let's talk running backs, free agency, or the draft. The Falcons are going to be in the market again for a running back. Steezy, I'll start with you. Should they look towards free agency first, or maybe at third, fourth round, and maybe the sixth round? I don't know. Sometimes you can find guys in the sixth round, and 2 months later, they're starting in the NFL. So, well, maybe not 2 months, but you guys get the point. 4 months later, I think they're starting in the NFL. So, Steezy, what do you think the Falcons should do? Should they look towards the draft, or should they look into free agency?
You got to look towards the draft. I mean, look at James Robinson a couple years ago for the Jaguars, undrafted. He finished as a Pro Bowler and finished with over 1,000 yards rushing. And so I think, to me, the answer is obvious. The answer is clear. You got to look towards the draft. Cordell Patterson, 30 years old. Mike Davis, 29 years old. You got a whole bunch of old dudes, at least as far as, running backs go, on that roster. And so you need an infusion of young talent. You need an infusion of, somebody who's fresh out of college. I mean, I really feel like they could bring a spark to this ground attack. I haven't really seen any young running backs on this roster in the last couple of years. And so if you're going to address it, it's going to definitely have to be through the draft, whether that's in the second round, third round, fourth, fifth, sixth round, maybe, heck, even an undrafted dude. It don't really matter. But I think at this point for the running back room, whether or not he's going to start, whether or not he's going to be a rotational piece, you definitely need some young blood in there, just because a lot of guys in the room, 30 and up.
Okay, Craig, your thoughts on the Falcons. Is it free agency or the draft? Where should they look for a running back?
I got to agree with Steezy. I think it's definitely in the draft. I don't know what all running backs are going to be available in free agency yet at the moment, but I totally agree that having some young talent instead of just refilling a bunch of old guys after old guys and stuff, it's definitely the better way to go. There's a couple of running backs that I think they should probably take even as early as the second round. Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M, big dude. He's more of a power back, but that's something I haven't seen in Atlanta in a very long time. So I think that might bring some versatility to the offense. Or from the Big 12 at Iowa State, Breece Hall is ridiculously talented. And because they love to pass so much, and Cordell Patterson was huge in the passing game in the backfield, I think someone like Breece Hall would just bring a lot of just like fresh young talent to that offense. So I think with one of their 2 second-round picks, that either of those guys would be a great pickup.
Sean, your thoughts on the free agent running backs, or do you think that the Falcons need to go into the draft to address those issues?
At first, I was going to say free agency, man, but, you guys kind of convinced me on that. They should go drafted because it's like you all said. I mean, Cordell is 30 years old still. I know we talked about the last segment. He hasn't took as much punishment, but hey, it's a 17-game season now. You're going to get nicked up. You might miss a couple games, and I don't think they're going to re-sign Mike Davis after this year. I think he was in a 1-year deal as well, so you still going to have, they at least probably have a backup running back. I know Wayne Gallman was on the team last year. Maybe they re-sign him as well. I forget the contract. It's not on top of my head right now, but I think at the worst case, you still go in the draft. You still bring some young blood in there, someone with some more speed as well. And yeah, I think it could definitely help out, with the run game, because at this point, and I know we're going to get to Matt Ryan in a minute, you still have to, you don't want to be too one-dimensional. Cordell, he definitely stepped up last year, but he didn't have 1,000 rushing yards. You know what I mean? And of course, he wasn't necessarily used as necessarily the every down back, so they probably have to use him like that. But you definitely want to be more dependent or have more, let's say, be more successful in the run game and not have to rely too much on a 30, 36, 37-year-old Matt Ryan, coming of age right now. So I think it is important, at least probably the second or third round, to get a running back. And I would say at least moving more towards the draft than a free agent, than a free agency, unless you just get a stud back. But I don't think it's any stud backs like a Jonathan Taylor, anybody like that is going to be available. So, I'm saying towards the draft.
Look, I'm leaning towards the draft as well, too. Maybe 4th round, 5th round, or 6th round. But I'm looking at the free agents, and one guy I like, and I still think he could produce on a high level. And I think Arthur Smith could do some things with him. Melvin Gordon, 28 years old. He's not an old man yet.
I was just about to say that, bro.
I love
I was
Melvin
just about
Gordon.
to say that.
Look, Melvin Gordon, you can use him in the passing game. He's a shifty back. He gets you some yards. He's not maybe a big star like maybe he used to be when he was a little bit younger, but I still think there's a lot of production with him. I'm not giving up on him. Whoever signs him, he's going to produce. Just watch. But speaking of the draft, let's transition to the first round. The Falcons have a lot of holes. They pick number 8. Some people think a wide receiver, could be cornerback, defensive tackle, D-end. I'm hearing quarterback. Craig, let's start with you. What do the Falcons need to prioritize in that first round?
David Ojabo from Michigan, the edge rusher. He just now in college, his final season had 11 sacks. That is extremely rare in college because you only play 12 games. So that would be like in the NFL in the modern like length of a season having 16 sacks, which is easily Pro Bowl level. He's only been playing football since his junior year of high school. The guy is deadly.
Wow.
And their past season, Dante Fowler, who apparently isn't on the team anymore, from what someone said earlier, but he only had 4.5 sacks. That is ridiculous. And then Grady Jarrett, the guy who was, one of the leaders on the defense whenever they played the Patriots in the Super Bowl, he only had like 1 or 2 sacks this past season. So edge rusher, easy choice. Definitely need to pick that up first. I expect Aiden Hutchinson and a few of those big name guys, Kayvon from Oregon, all those guys are probably going to be picked up by other teams. I think David Ojabo would definitely be the best edge rusher available by the time they have their pick in the first round.
Sean, do you think they should go edge rusher, quarterback, or other? Who do you think the Falcons should draft in that first round?
I think definitely, edge rusher. We got to get more defensive pressure, definitely on the quarterback. The thing with the Falcons is we don't really see a lot of turnovers. When it comes towards, of course, playing defense, it's rare to see that. And when it does happen, of course, it could change the momentum of the game. But I'm thinking offensive line, man. I'm still thinking offensive line. I've seen too many times Matt Ryan dropping back, getting sacked, or even if he feels, pressure because of the previous play he got sacked, he might just fall down himself because he doesn't want to take that punishment. So I'm still thinking offensive line. I think we had some lineman issues last year. A couple guys who got injured during the season. So I'm really still thinking offensive line, man, because we still have to protect Matt Ryan. It starts with the quarterback. And obviously Matt Ryan's under contract, so I don't see them, going to get a quarterback. I know, I mentioned before, if they did get a quarterback, I would trade for Russell, try to trade and get Russell Wilson or some of these elite guys out there. But 9 chances out of 10, I doubt that's going to happen. So I would say, honestly, from the draft, definitely you need to get an edge rusher, but I'm still thinking offensive line, man, because you still got to protect the quarterback and open up, some holes for Cordell and whoever else is in the backfield.
So we've heard edge rusher, we've heard offensive line. Steezy A, who do you think the Falcons should draft in the first round? What position do they need to prioritize?
So allow me to preface what I'm about to say with these stats. The Atlanta Falcons have not finished with 30-plus sacks in a year since 2018. So it's 4 years running. This past year, they actually finished dead last in the NFL with 18 sacks. The only team in the NFL to not even hit 20. And so to me, that's just, I don't know. Every time I look at the Falcons defense, it's like, yeah, y'all got some studs. AJ Terrell shut down. He's a lockdown quarterback. Among other pieces, Grady Jarrett had a down year, but, he's usually one of the best interior linemen in all the National Football League. But I just never really see a consistent amount of pressure on a year-to-year basis. Dante Fowler, he excels when he's not a number one. What happened in Atlanta, what went wrong was he was the number one, and so he's not suited. He's not fit to be a number one. That's the reason why his production was so lackluster. But to me, I got to double down on what Craig said. It has to be edge rusher. I know there's other needs elsewhere, and they don't have like a bounty of draft picks. But if I'm the Atlanta Falcons, if I'm with Thomas Dimitroff, is that the GM? I'm doing everything in my power.
He used to be the GM.
I'm
he
tripping.
Got canned. Yep, it's all
I'm
good.
tripping. Who's the GM now?
I just forgot his name.
Terry Fontenot.
Yeah, Terry Fontenot.
Yeah, okay, right. No, if I'm him, I'm doing whatever I can to trade him for Kayvon Thibodeau. I understand he's probably a lock to be drafted in the top 5, but I think he could potentially be the closest thing to a generational prospect. I think his athleticism, everything is so tantalizing about him. He might not be able to produce, off the rip. He might not come in and put up 10 sacks in his first year, but I really feel like his potential, what he can be, I think that'll be essential to what, Atlanta's defense could possibly be down the line. And so I'm doing everything in my power. Well, you guys are picking 7th or 8th in the first round. If I got to trade into the top 5, top 4, top 3 to land a guy like him, a stud like him, I'm doing that. And hopefully there's no more years of sacks under 20, because that's, to me, at least relative to other teams, that's putrid. That's not good enough. That's not going to cut it.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that one. Kayvon Thibodeaux, love his first step, great length, gets to the quarterback, consistent pressure. If it's possible, and you're right, Craig and Steezy, maybe they would have to trade up for that, but maybe he drops. I don't know. Sometimes these mock drafts, we fall in love with it, and guys drop for whatever reason, whatever information comes out. Maybe the 40 time doesn't look, I don't know. Maybe they're not lifting. Who knows what's going to happen between now and the draft, but I like him. That's one of the players I'm in love with is Kayvon Thibodeaux. Look, let's move on and let's talk about Matt Ryan, the 36-year-old quarterback. Look, to me, this was probably his worst season since 2015. Under 4,000 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Steezy, do you see Matt Ryan having a bounce-back season headed into the 2022 year?
Man, right now, I don't really have any sort of confidence in that being the case. Last year, the offense, like Sean, like you mentioned, it's been way too one-dimensional. And right now, as the way things stand, there's no other receivers opposite Kyle Pitts, just because we don't know what's going on with Calvin Ridley. I don't think he has the pieces around him to really optimize his performance. Yes, he has an offensive mastermind, a genius in Arthur Smith, but when you're 36-year-old and when you're that limited physically and athletically, you're going to need everything around you to be perfect. There's still holes in offensive line. There's holes at running back. There's holes, in pass catchers not named Kyle Pitts. And so, to me, I don't think that's an optimal situation to expect some sort of a career resurgence from Matt Ryan. But let's see. I feel like with the offseason, there are definitely moves to be made. And if they make the right moves, if they play their cards right, then potentially, just because I don't think he's a scrub, he just doesn't have much talent around him. The defense has been pretty bad too. And so maybe you work, your way around those things and you improve different areas. You give him a better offensive line and whatnot. But until I see those things right now, I don't have any reason to say yes.
Craig, Matt Ryan, do you see him headed into 2022 having a better year?
I think that totally depends on, one, if they keep Calvin Ridley, and two, if they maybe sign some receivers or grab somebody else in the draft at receiver as well, or beef up the O-line. One of those things, or more than one of those things, needs to happen. Otherwise, he'll have another repeat season just like this year. I would love to see Calvin Ridley back on that team, and I think that would automatically help Matt Ryan improve from this past season. So, there's a few pieces that need to move around, a few things that need to stay, but if all those things happen, I expect him to have a pretty solid year. I don't think his abilities have really, he's not too old, in my opinion. I think he's still got a few years left. He can play until he's almost 40 if he has the pieces around him. At the moment, he doesn't, though. I can see why a lot of people think, he's done for much stuff. But I think if he gets those pieces around him, I think he'll have.
Okay. Sean, your thoughts on Matt Ryan? Do you see 2022 being a big season for him?
Well, again, it's kind of like, the guys have said, it really depends on the pieces around him. Of course, we automatically think of, the top receiver on the team. To me, I still think it's Calvin Ridley. If he's back on the team, yeah, because it continue to help Kyle Pitts, get more involved. You got another number one receiver, number one option on the field. It's going to help you get, more receptions and get you more space. They don't have to worry about doubling you as much. So it definitely depends on that. Hey, I'm thinking of, why not look at a guy like Allen Robinson, be the one of the bigger receivers that you had since Julio Jones. Allen Robinson, he didn't have a great season last year. He didn't play with the best quarterbacks. Justin Fields, the rookie last year. Andy Dalton is Andy Dalton. We know he's a red rocket. He can be hot. He could be cold, or mix in between. So, I think if Allen Robinson's available, why not try to get him? I still remember 2020 year, Nick Foles and Allen Robinson, they came back and destroyed us, man, in the Mercedes-Benz, stadium. So I would try to look for a guy like, Allen Robinson. I don't think he's going to be trying to ask for too much money. He didn't have a top 15 season, so I don't think he's going to get top 15 money. But all that being said, man, I think as far as eyeing receivers, I would look at him if we do or don't get Calvin Ridley. But on top of that, man, I just, with Matt Ryan, again, it depends on the type of guys he's dealing with. I think still offensive line. If you don't have an offensive line to protect your quarterback, again, just like Steve said, he's at this point in his career, his physical awareness and all those things, it's not the best. And he's never been the most mobile, but, this time he's continuing to get older. So it's not going to help out if he's not going to protect it. So I think it really depends. I think Matt Ryan is still, if I were to rank him, I still think he's a top half quarterback, maybe 16, 15. I still think he's capable of helping win games. But again, at this point in his career, he can't necessarily say, hey, having a Brady effect. It doesn't matter who I got. I have the awareness and everything. I'm just going to lead us. We're going to find a way to get it done. I don't think that's the case for Matt Ryan at this point in his career. So I think he's still capable of helping us win games, like I just said. But, it really depends on the pieces around him to see, if you can get, say maybe 50 or 60 more yards to that 4,000-yard season. Maybe instead of 20 touchdowns, 30 touchdowns. And, he didn't 12 interceptions. It's not too high, but it's not too low. I like to see it around 8 interceptions or, so around there. So it really depends on the piece around him, I would say.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Sean, and I agree with you, Steezy. Look, clearly the Falcons have talent issues, but also Matt Ryan, he's 36 years old. He's declining. He hasn't been as good as he used to be, but it's not all his fault. Nobody's ever said it's all his fault. The pieces need to be good around him. But, yeah, he definitely is capable with Calvin Ridley back. Well, Kyle Pitts, who I think is going to be the man on the team, is going to be Kyle Pitts. He could be a top 15 to 18 quarterback in the league. And I don't think that's too bad for a quarterback his age, because for the most part, it's a young man's game. Yeah, we look at the Aaron Rodgers of the world. We look at the Tom Brady. Not every guy's going to be that. And Matt Ryan, he's still a starter. I'm surprised that, and maybe there has been interest. I'm surprised that the Falcons maybe haven't tried to move him, or other teams have tried to say, hey, maybe he could be our Stafford. Maybe he's the missing link to a championship team. But obviously, Arthur Blank, he came out and said, he's our guy. We could still win on and play on a championship-like level. I believe that's what he said, and still be effective. So, look, Arthur Blank believes in him. He's the owner. That's all that matters, right? So we'll see how the season plays out for the Falcons, but they have to hit on free agency. They have to hit on the draft. Saying that, we're wrapping the show up. We're presented by Your Future Media. We're presented by Got Skills Pro and Yas Socks. Thank you, Steezy A. Smith, Sean, Craig, and I think he got bounced out the live, but he's back on. Thank you, Craig, as well, too. Anybody want to leave their plug before the end of the show?
Yeah, I just want to say it was nice to meet you, Sean. Nice to meet you, Craig. Jansen,
nice
my man. This is overdue. And then to the audience out there, please don't forget to hit that subscribe. Be sure to show my man some love. Jansen Harris, Just Good Network, Flying High Podcast, all social media platforms. And after that, I don't know what your guys' handles are, but then be on the lookout for me, primarily on YouTube, Steezy A. Smith, SteezyASmith. I've also been working diligently to working on my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and all that good stuff. So, show brother some love, man. But I appreciate y'all for having me.
Absolutely. Anybody got any more shout-outs? Like you want to say something, Sean?
No, man, it's awesome. As usual, Jansen, working with you. Good to meet you as well, Steve A. Smith. Great hearing from you as well. Also Seattle fans, cool to hear, other teams as well like that. And also you too, Craig, great job. And yeah, that's all I got to say, man. It's a pleasure.
Man, can we give Craig some love? Look at the hat, man. Look at the hat, the throwback. I'm jealous, Craig. I like the throwback, man. Craig was like, I'm just going to come in here and style on everybody. I'm going to come in here with the throwback. I love it, man. Love the hat, man. Great job, everybody. The Flying High Podcast. I'm Jansen Harris, and we are out.